Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. I hope everybody is having a great Friday morning out there. Been kind of a chaotic 24 hours. Obviously, we had the live show yesterday, which was great. Shout out to everybody that was rocking with us in the Toyota chat. It was really active, a lot of fun. Last night on the Avs side of things was chaotic. I've talked about it a little bit, not too much on this podcast, obviously, given that it's the Rams show, but I am helping out on the Avalanche side of things. Big 7-3 win, historic night from Cale Makar. Gets totally overshadowed by a third period trade for Brock Nelson. We're scrambling, trying to get content out. Actually, if you're interested in more NHL content, go check out the DNVR Avalanche side of things. They'll be live for the next couple hours. I actually might pop on at some point today. But they'll be keeping you up to date with all things you need to know about the NHL trade deadline and all that fun stuff. Much love to Tiff in the Toyota chat, shouting out some of that work we did last night. So if my brain is a little bit mush today, bear with me. I'm running on fumes and Dayquil at this point. It's always how it goes, right? Nobody ever gets sick when life is slow and you're able to just chill at home for a couple of days and work will just kind of catch up when you feel ready. It's always when you're right in the grind of things. Definitely catching up to me of late. But we've got a ton to talk about. It's a big weekend. It's a big weekend for the Avs, but it's a huge weekend for CSU. And the Rams have an opportunity to potentially play for a share of the conference title tonight. It would also take a loss from New Mexico against UNLV. But at the very minimum, an opportunity to clinch the 2 seed in the Mountain West tournament. Massive game against Boise, biggest game CSU has played so far this season. Just a crazy journey that they've been on. Kevin Lytle had a great piece where he kind of went through some of the metrics. We played audio yesterday where Medved talked a little bit about what has changed for this group. It really started to click on the defensive side, and then offensively they kind of found a rhythm. But to go from being 5-5 in mid-December and ranking in the 200s in net at one point to now being a top 60 team across the board analytically, to be in the bubble conversation, to have already won a program record 15 conference wins this season with an opportunity to make that 16. And on top of that, an opportunity to win a program record 7th road game in league play. It's just a testament to the work and the buy-in from this team. And Kevin said it from the beginning. I said it from the beginning. Niko Medved said it from the beginning. This team was always going to be better in February than they were in November. There were just so many moving pieces. The injuries to Bemba early on in the year really messed up the rotation. On top of that, you had sophomores that needed to make a big leap. They were assuming much larger roles than they held as true freshmen. And to the credit of those new guys like Ethan Morton, to the credit of the sophomores like Kyan Evans and Rashawn Bemba and Jalen Crocker-Johnson, who obviously came over via the portal, those guys have all taken a massive leap. And it's really led to a pretty fun season, in my opinion. And I've talked about it a lot, so I'm trying not to get too repetitive. But in a lot of ways, I've had as much fun this year, if not more fun, than just about any run that I can remember. Some of that comes from a lack of expectation. It just felt like there was a lot of weight these last couple of years that the team was carrying. There was a standard that they really needed to meet. And obviously, we want them to sustain the success, but I do think that most people understood, given that you were moving on from Isaiah Stevens, given that you lost Joel Scott, and like 4 of your 5 top leading scorers, most of your leading contributors outside of Neek and Jalen Lake from last year, that there'd probably be some bumps along the way. And at this point, it's easy to go woulda, coulda, shoulda. Most certainly, if they don't make the NCAA tournament, some of those moments in November and December are going to be haunting. It's just the reality of it. We talked about it a million times, but whether that be the UC Riverside game, Washington, CU, you name it, VCU, I think was one of the bigger missed opportunities, just given that you're leading late in the second half against a team that's now, fringe top 25. That would have been a big resume win for CSU. It would have been a statement opportunity early in the season that would have validated their resume on a national level. But obviously, we can't change the past. And this team is as hot as anybody right now in the league. And they're set up with this massive opportunity tonight, a chance to pull off a big win. 7th league road win would be a program record. Not a place historically that CSU has had a ton of success. You look at the history, the Rams only 3-11 all time in Boise. But 2 of those wins have come under Niko Medved. So it has been a place where he's been able to have some success, where other coaches have come up short. All time, the series history, it's a competitive series. Boise leads at 18-16. A lot of those wins for CSU have come in Moby Arena, but you have a chance here to make a statement. 2 of the hottest teams in the league. If you can win this one, it at least keeps the hope of an at-large bid alive, on top of giving you a more favorable path to the conference title game out in Las Vegas. I still think if they win this game against Boise State and they can win 2 more in Vegas and at least make the championship game, as long as it wasn't a fluky team that they lost to in the title game, like let's say somebody like Nevada were to get hot. And I guess that couldn't happen if CSU is the 2 seed, but whatever. Let's say a bottom seed gets hot and they make the title game. If they were to upset CSU, that would hurt. But if you were to lose to one of the other top 3 or 4 teams in the conference, if you could pull this quad one win in Boise, get another statement win or 2 in Vegas, I think they're at least in the discussion in a year where the bubble is pretty weak. Now, in that situation, you're going to need a couple of things to go your way. You should be rooting for a lot of chalk as far as the other conference tournaments go. You don't want a ton of bid stealers, because you don't want to be in a position where a team that seemingly was a lock for the NCAA tournament comes up short, and then they end up, being a fringe team and taking a spot that CSU was hoping for, because a team like, Oregon State a couple years ago gets hot as a 10 seed, ends up making the tournament. There are 3 or 4 bid stealers. CSU ends up as the 2nd team left out of the tournament because of what happened in November and December. You're never really going to feel all that comfortable in the position you're in without getting an auto bid. But I think CSU is as capable of anybody in the league of going on a run right now. I would say CSU and Boise and New Mexico have been the most consistent teams of late. UNLV is hot, but I think you could poke some holes in their resume just based on some of the teams that they've beaten versus who they've lost to. But it's been so fun to see the growth that we've seen from CSU this season. And I'm really looking forward to tonight. We're actually going to play a clip here from Niko Medved. This is from December 6th. It was before they played CU, so the turnaround didn't happen immediately after this, but right around this time frame, he was just kind of talking about guys needing experience and needing an opportunity to grow. And we've seen that come to fruition. So here's a clip of Niko Medved from December 6th. It's just to kind of set the scene and keep things rolling with the theme of, man, look how far this team has come. The guys probably prefer to play in electric atmospheres, but was there maybe some of going out to the NTE where, they're not the most crowded, where it's kind of a nice element to just kind of play and not have to do it with maybe as much pressure?
I think so. I think it was good to play, to whatever power for, opponents that way. And I think even though we went 1-1, I think after beating TCU, I think the guys, sometimes you have to have it go your way to kind of believe you can do it, and those guys hung in there. And after the disappointment of the Washington game, I thought was right there for the taking. Got to get up in 14 hours and go play the next opponent. And I thought that was great. Sometimes it's great to be on the road together too. You get to spend maybe even a little bit more time doing stuff as a team together. So I think it was good for us. And thank God it showed today. Like, we were able to get some momentum from that game, and it showed up here tonight.
Sort of in the same vein, do you think you've played a bunch of close games? Does that almost force feed growth?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, what, 3 overtime games? We've had 2 threes banked in right against us to go to overtime. It's been kind of wild. Every game has just gone right down to the wire. I think you get better doing that, right? Playing in close games and understanding what it takes to win, and maybe that does force growth for our team. And it's a long year, you just got to keep going. And now we turn the page into December. November is what it is, but we learned and got better, hopefully, about ourselves. And now we got to keep going, and we got to be a lot better this month than we were in November.
All right. Obviously, they ended up coming up short in Boulder after that statement, but I think it really rings true with what the theme of this season has been. You had a team that went through it early on in the year, whether you look at the UC Riverside loss and even a couple of the close wins, getting your butt kicked on the boards, by teams like DU and Riverside, to losing heartbreaking games against Washington and VCU, and they obviously pulled out that win over TCU, but they just needed experience. They needed to play through some of these woes and figure some things out in terms of the rotation. They've been able to iron it out. Guys have really ascended as the season has gone on, and it's been huge. And now you're set up with this big time Friday night showdown. I'm going to get into the previews here, talk about some keys. We'll talk about Degenhart, Cardenas, definitely tough draws for CSU defensively. And then in the second half of the show, we will get into CSU football. We've got spring ball coming up right around the corner. I'm going to play a couple of clips from Jay Norvell from December just to kind of refresh everybody's memory in terms of what some of the storylines are coming into spring this year. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember, but a refresher never hurts. If you've got any questions, comments, etc., throw them our way in the Toyota chat. I will get to as many of them as I can throughout the show. If I don't get to them right away, we'll start it and get to it in the final segment. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, I certainly would appreciate it. Real quick, we are going to take a break. We're going to shout out a couple of our sponsors, and then we'll get more into this matchup between CSU and Boise. The Rams obviously pulled off a big 75-72 win in that first matchup, but there are some things that you could look at from how that matchup played out that could have you feeling a little bit uneasy going into this game against Boise. I mean, the reality is that Degenhart is one of the best players that's played in the league in the last 15, 20 years. He's just such a unique mismatch on both sides of the ball, particularly offensively. I mean, he's a guy that can just murder you in the paint, but he can also step out to the perimeter, stretch the floor a little bit. And the thing about the game right now is if you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said the key would just be to make Degenhart get 50. And if anybody and stop anybody else from essentially being able to get hot, you can roll with Degenhart getting his, because basically he's always going to get his. What's scary right now, I think, and I'll talk about this more after the break, is just that a lot of the depth pieces for Boise State are starting to click, and it's turning into a situation where, yeah, Degenhart might go for 22, but they've got 3, 4, 5 other guys that are capable of burning you for double-digit points as well. So it's going to be a really tough game. I mean, there's a reason you're 5.5-point underdogs going in, but I also think that it's not a matchup that has you shaking in your boots. I think it's one that feels winnable if CSU plays to their potential, but a couple of keys that'll need to go their way, and we'll get into all of that. Like I said, we are going to take a break here. We're going to shout out a couple of our partners, starting with our good friends over at Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades that are built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. An independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product that rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. They've got durable frames, crystal clear optics, so you can wear them while doing anything. Not only are you going to look stylish out on the town, but you can wear them if you're out rafting, if you're enjoying all that Colorado has to offer. Maybe you're just chilling in the backyard. Maybe you're walking the dog, whatever you are into. Shady Rays is perfect for you. I wear mine everywhere. I'll bring 2 different pairs out to Vegas next week in the Mountain West tournament. Shady Rays has been great to us over the years. They'll be great to you as well. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out the best deal of the season. All you got to do is go to shadyrays.com. Use that code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I also want to shout out our friends over at Toyota, proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the all-new Tacoma or the Land Cruiser. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. With 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra i4 Max hybrid truck, not to be outdone, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Again, Toyota, a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right, I could use a Toyota truck these days with all the commuting I'm doing around the state between work and family obligations. Have some tough stuff going on there where I've had to be commuting back and forth across the state. It'd be nice to have that all-wheel drive. The little Kia that I'm rocking at the moment does not always get the job done in the snowy seasons. And as all Coloradans know, March and April can be a bit of a mess. So fingers crossed, hoping for some good weather over the next couple of months. I am over the snow. I am over the winter. I am excited for spring. I'm excited for March Madness. I'm excited for spring football. Feels like there's a little more intrigue in spring football this year than maybe the last couple of years. There's always a ton of interest in the first year, sometimes even the second year, and in terms of what are things going to look like once you get established, like the Rams kind of were last year, where a lot of the starters were returning on both sides of the ball. It's not quite as interesting unless something dramatically newsworthy happens, key injury, which is horrible, but I just mean you kind of know what the deal is at that point, and it's really just about refinement, and there's a lot of value for those practices inside the locker room. Like, it's beneficial for the program. I just don't know how interesting last year was from a content standpoint, and this year I do feel like there's a lot more intrigue, so we'll get into that. There's some storylines. Want to continue talking about this CSU Boise State game for a few minutes, really set the scene, talk about some of the things that need to go well for the Rams in order to have success in this matchup. Looking at KenPom, they have Boise State winning by about 5. It's kind of been going back and forth all week. KenPom gives CSU a 34% chance of winning this game, which feels about right. Boise, over the last 5 years, they've not lost very often at home. This year especially, they've been tremendous on their home floor. You look at what they did against teams like New Mexico and Utah State and some of these other teams, in their own building. They're a tough matchup. And where it really starts, and I think this is a great comment from Jacob Kennedy, which kind of naturally segues us here in the Toyota chat, is you've got to have a strong presence in the post. Even in that first matchup, you look at what the Rams were able to do. They win that game 75-72. They led for just under 36 minutes. So they're basically in control throughout, but it took CSU hitting 11 threes, and we'll talk about three-point shooting. I think it's going to be a big factor. But it took CSU hitting 11 threes to win the game by 3, and a lot of that had to do with the success that Boise was able to have in the post. They finished with 40 points in the paint, really got whatever looks they wanted all game long down low, and Dagenhart was a big part of that. He had 27 points in the loss for Boise, 10 of 17 from the floor, only hit 1 of 4 threes, 6 made free throws out of 7 attempts. So again, basically all of that damage happening in the post. And I just don't really know what CSU does defensively to stop it, because outside of David Roddy, nobody has had a ton of success guarding him. He's just such a mismatch for you. I mean, he's got the length and the size. He's a big ass strong dude, but he's versatile offensively, can put the ball on the floor, can burn you with his back to the basket, but like I said, can step out to the perimeter and knock down a 3-point shot. I mean, he's just a really talented guy, and been playing him for 4 years now. At this point, he's had a lot of success against CSU. I mean, he went for 25 in the second matchup against CSU last year, Obviously went for 27 in the first, but he averages 18.5 points per game in 7 career matchups against CSU. So outside of a game here or there, they just really have never been able to slow him down. Again, earlier in the season, I would have said he can go for 30. That's fine. Make somebody else beat you. That's just turning into a little bit more of a dangerous proposition at this point, given some of the other pieces that they have that are playing really well. They've had some young guys step up. Omar Stanley, who was a non-factor in the first game. He started, but he only had 2 points and played 12 minutes. I don't remember if he got injured. I'll have to go back and look on that. That's a little bit weird to me, but he is someone who I believe he was second team all conference last year, was projected to, as a senior, really make a big leap and play this big role. Was really out of sorts offensively for a lot of the year. And basically, if Cardenas and Degenhart weren't balling out, going for like 30 plus, Boise didn't really have an opportunity to win with any type of consistency. And a lot like CSU, they needed some of their other guys to make a big leap. And one of those is Andrew Meadow. He actually went 4 of 5 from the floor in that first matchup against CSU, but a quiet 9 points. He was a pretty big factor in Boise's win over CSU out in Boise last year. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. But I mean, they've got Carmichael. He's doing his thing. They've got a freshman, Buchanan, I believe is his name. He's doing some stuff of late. It's just a little bit unnerving given the position that Boise State is in. CSU as hot as anybody. 6-game win streak is longest in the league at the moment, but Boise right behind you with a 5-game winning streak themselves. Cardenas, a lot like Degenhart, historically has had a lot of success against CSU. He's going to initiate a lot of their offensive action. In 6 career games against the Rams, he averages 13 points and 5 assists. Those two in the first matchup did their thing, 27 points from Degenhart, 18 from Cardenas. Nobody else really did much, and that was why they just weren't able to overcome CSU, despite playing pretty well. I felt like it was one of the better played games on both sides that we've seen this year in terms of back and forth. Like the Rams were basically in control throughout, but I mean, you look at the stats here, Boise State 52% from the floor, CSU 46, the Rams 46% from 3-point. I think that's a big factor. Boise only 33% in the matchup. They went 6 of 18, 6 threes is, more than they hit a lot of nights, but I just keep coming back to the fact that CSU hit 11 threes and only won by 3. And a lot of that has to do with not being able to get stops defensively. And I think you're going to have to be able to force Boise State to settle for jump shots. The perimeter game is an area where I think CSU has a big advantage. The numbers show that. Just the eye test shows it as well. But I think that's an area where if CSU is going to pull this off, they're going to have to be really good on both sides there. And typically you tend to shoot the ball better at home. So can you do it on the road? One guy I think that could be a big factor for CSU is Kyan Evans. He really started to come alive, in early January. At this point, he was playing pretty well. Let me see what he had in that first game. I think it was like 13 points. Yeah, he had 13 points and 6 assists. So really showed off the facilitation, which was an encouraging sign. But I think his 3-point shooting in particular it's a big factor for the Rams right now. 6 of his 10 best scoring performances this season have come out on the road. And not only has he played well away from Moby, I mean, he drops 20 in Clune, but scoring 20 against Air Force is one thing. The fact that he's hit 3+ threes now against Utah State on the road, he did it against San Diego State and Nevada as well. I mean, Reno, SDSU, Logan, those are 3 tough places to play. And it kind of brings the best out of him. He seems to be one of those gamers that when the lights get brighter, when the matchup gets more intense, like he's up for that. We've seen he has the ability to even sit for long stretches and immediately heat up. If you could get, 15 plus out of Kyan and on top of that, get a really strong performance from Nate Clifford and Jalen Lake, I think your stars are going to have to really perform. They're going to have to shine bright on a night where you're on the road. It's senior night, against Degenhart. Yes, you'd love to play spoilers, but it's going to be a raucous crowd. Boise's going to want it. They're going to want to send one of their greatest, players in program history off with a bang. Can you be who dictates the tempo and the style of this matchup? Can you keep Boise out of the paint? Can you get them to settle for jumpers? The numbers say if you force Boise to settle for outside jumpers all game long, that's going to favor the Rams. Now, at home, you never know what could happen. They could just have a fluky shooting night, get red hot. And if that happens, I think you just kind of have to live with it. Because coming in right now, CSU is the number 1 3-point shooting team in Mountain West play at just under 39%. They're also a top 4 3-point shooting defense, though, giving up 34.3%. So really doing well on both sides of the ball there, where Boise is kind of struggling. They're the 9th best 3-point shooting team at 32.5%. They're only the 8th best 3-point defensive team in the Mountain West, giving up 35.6% from beyond the perimeter. If you're like 2 of 13 from deep, this is a night where you shoot sub 30%. It feels hard to see CSU coming out with the win outside of something really fluky happening, like Degenhart and Cardenas just not showing up at all. Maybe if you shot like 30 free throws or something like that, something crazy where it makes sense why you didn't have the 3-point shooting. But I think that's going to be a big factor in this matchup is, can you force Boise State to settle for jumpers? On top of that, you need them to miss those jumpers. So defensively, can you force them to settle? Can you test shots, without fouling, all that fun stuff? And then offensively, can you get the type of looks that you were able to get against a really solid defensive Boise State team? Let's see how many assists they had in that first matchup. 19 assists, so just under 20 on that first game. But CSU is undefeated this year when they get 20 or more assists. So I think those are a couple of really big factors. I'm really interested to see what CSU does against those stars, but I'm interested to see how CSU stars do themselves. Neat Clifford averages about 13 points a game against Boise State. I think he's going to probably need to give you closer to the 20 that he had in the first matchup in Fort Collins, because, again, I just have a hard time seeing at least one of those guys, Degenhart and Cardenas, not having a really solid performance, that they're just four-year, starters, really veteran players that have proven in a pretty large sample size that they can be a thorn in the side for CSU. And this is where you need your guys to step up. I think it's really encouraging that Jalen Lake has been shooting the ball better of late. I think he's like 45% over his last 5 games. I talked about that yesterday. If he could give you 12 to 15, and you can get that out of Cayenne, basically if you can get, let's say, 25 points out of those two, you can get 20 and, the typical 10 out of Neek. If you do anything in the post and Boise doesn't light you up, you're going to be in a pretty good spot. But you need your top guys to step up. And then, what can you get in the paint yourself? I think Degenhart is going to get a lot of easy looks. Can you establish your own presence in the paint? Maybe get somebody like Degenhart in foul trouble by Bemba, having a big game, or Jalen Crocker-Johnson. He's really been great as well. One of the things that I love about Croc is if he hits a 3 or 2 early, you really see the stress that it puts on an opposing defense, because they got to respect his shot. I mean, he's shooting it at a high clip, especially in the league slate. And so they come out to the line and then he burns you, and then he'll cut inside. He'll post up on you. Like, I just love his versatility. Again, coming back to why you should be encouraged about the future of this program, regardless of whether CSU ultimately makes the NCAA tournament this spring or not, is I think the future looks pretty dang bright for guys like Jalen Crocker-Johnson and Kyan Evans, and you got to be able to retain them. A lot can change really quickly from what I've heard behind the scenes. CSU feels pretty good about their potential of retaining those guys, but I think, again, if you were going to pull off a night where objectively you're not expected to win, getting a big performance from those rising stars and Kyan Evans and Jalen Crocker-Johnson could really go a long way. You're just going to need more than 1 or 2 guys to be able to get in a rhythm offensively. I think if you're going to have a chance, Boise, 4 straight games have held their opponents sub 70. Can you get to like 75 points? If you get to 75 with how you're playing defensively, I think you have a pretty good chance of winning. Getting quality minutes out of the rotation would be a big factor as well. They were good in the first game, not great, but can you get 15 points off the bench and some quality minutes from guys like Bowen Bourne, Kyle Jorgensen, can he come in or Jabba or somebody and not immediately rack up 2-3 fouls? Can they hit some open jump shots? Like, that's a big factor when this offense is really clicking. Guys like Bowen Bourne, guys like Jorgensen, Keyshawn Williams, they're stepping up and they're making their open looks. When they're a little bit more out of sorts, those guys tend to struggle, and then it puts a lot of stress on, Neek and Cayenne and everybody else to shoulder that load for you. And then can you withstand a run or two and not let things spiral out of control? CSU's been really resilient this year. It's been a big factor in their success in the calendar year of 2025. On the road, in a hostile atmosphere against an experienced team like Boise, they're inevitably going to have, a 6-0 run, an 8-0 run. Can you prevent it from being like one of those New Mexico death runs where it's 18-2 or something like that? If you give up an 8-0 run, can you hit a big three the other way, then get a stop and just have that response? You're going to take some blows in a matchup like this against a team with this much size, experience, and talent. But what type of resolve do you have on a night where a lot's at stake, an opportunity to extend the program record for league wins, set a program record for road conference wins in a season, potentially get a share of the league title, although not likely given that I don't expect New Mexico to fall to UNLV, but you never know. UNLV's hot right now. What can you do in a big time matchup? We've got some questions here in the Toyota chat that I'm going to get to in just a second, but I do need to pay the bills real quick. And I got to shout out a couple more partners, starting with our longtime friends, Breckenridge Brewery. I don't think anybody has been with us at DNVR longer than our friends at Breckenridge Brewery. If you'd like to go to an Avs game, and it's a lot of fun right now, 4-game win streak, they're rolling at home. The power play looks awesome. Enter the Breck Brew Ice Deck giveaway. You're going to get complimentary food and drink plus a couple of tickets on the glass. These tickets are sick. I've got some friends at Breck, so I'll go down there and say hi to them at the end of the game sometimes. It looks pretty fun. It's much better than the seat I have on press row. Check out Breck Brew's new West Coast style IPA as well, Ridge Runner. Double dry hop brew is inspired by the untamed beauty of Colorado's trails, creates bright notes of citrus and pine. Breck Brew is the official craft beer of DNVR. All comes down to their love and passion for making good beer. Check out the Breck Beer locator at breckbrew.com to find a brew near you. I also want to talk to you guys about Lucy. Lucy nicotine is awesome, 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco-free. Lucy breakers are nicotine pouches with a little extra surprise. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken open to release extra flavor and hydration so they don't get all like nasty and dry in your mouth like some of the other ones do. You can set up a subscription, get it delivered straight to your door, avoid the inconvenience of, oh man, I'm out of pouches. I'm going to have to hit up, a convenience store or something down the road. I like that Lucy's got a couple of awesome flavors that are unique. Their mango is my favorite. I also really love that they have a 4 milligram option. They're the only one that I've ever seen that has that. And it's the perfect balance for me, whether I'm just, busting out some late night writing, trying to keep, going on a time when I'm sick. Lucy is a great way to do it. Go to lucy.co/DNVR. If you use the code DNVR, you get 20% off your first order. Lucy has a 30-day refund policy. If you change your mind again, that's lucy.co. Use the code DNVR to get 20% off. Here comes the fine print. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age, and every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. All right, George wants to know, do you think a CSU win tonight does more to help CSU's at-large chances or hurt Boise's? Really both, I think, would be the way you would answer that, because I don't think either team's at-large candidacies are strong enough at the moment to survive a loss here. Boise is closer to the picture, so I guess I would argue just from that logic that it would help CSU's chances more than it would hurt Boise's. But I think essentially with a CSU win tonight and a Boise loss, they're basically on even playing field, with CSU maybe even having a stronger argument for an at-large case, just given that they would have swept Boise in that scenario. But I think the important thing to remember here is that we still have the Mountain West tournament. So, I mean, there's an opportunity for these teams to pick up, a couple more Q2, potentially even Q1 wins, depending on who they're going up against, likely Q2. But yeah, I think the answer would be both, which is kind of a cop-out, but I think that's the truth. Ant says a win tonight probably moves us up into the first 4 out, but we'd still need a couple more wins after tonight to get to the conference championship pretty much. Right there with you, Ant. I think that is an astute observation of where CSU is at in the grand scheme of things. I believe as of this morning, still the 5th team out in Joe Lenardi's bracket, but they're legitimately on bubble watch. And it's not just Ram fans talking themselves into, well, if everything goes perfect, and it kind of was the case when I first started talking about this a month ago, it was based on very, very tight restraints of if they can do this and this and this. And to CSU's credit, they've done that. They've really taken care of business here over the last couple of weeks. But this is going to be the biggest test of all. It's the toughest game of the season by far. Boise is as hot as anybody in the conference, and winning this one would be a pretty significant statement, I would think, in terms of where this squad is at right now. And I sure think it would go a long way with the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee and a lot of these, bracketologists buying into CSU in a major way, because I think everybody recognizes that right now the Rams are playing as well as any mid-major in the country right now, and the resume in 2025 is awesome, but the resume is all encompassing. And it's funny, like last year, the November resume is arguably what got CSU into the tournament. It was their saving grace. This year, it could be what holds them back. It just shows how it goes. It's a long season. It all counts. So we'll see. We'll see how they respond. I'll have a post-game podcast tomorrow. I'll have written takeaways, all of that, and then we'll start setting the scene for the Mountain West Tournament. A big couple of days coming up. I am looking forward to being out in Vegas. Looking forward to seeing if CSU can pull this off or not. We are going to transition here over the last 20 minutes or so. We can come back to hoops if anybody has more questions at the end, but we are going to transition here into the football side of things. Have really not talked about spring football at all yet because we've been so locked into this awesome run that we're having on the hoop side, but it's right around the corner. Feels like a great time to start focusing on it. We're going to start here with a clip from Jay Norvell after the Arizona Bowl, so December 28th. He is answering some questions from Kevin and I just about the direction of the offense, and this is kind of a way we'll segue into some of the big themes and questions for CSU in spring. But here's a clip from Jay Norvell following the bowl game on December 28th, and then we'll get into some of those questions we have for the Rams here in spring ball.
You moving forward to create more consistency offensively and scoring those points?
Well, there's a lot of things. We have to show more consistency. We got to develop playmakers. We have to develop playmakers in the passing game as well as in the running game. And, we've traditionally had that. We were young this year, in my opinion. We were really young at receiver. We were inexperienced at tight end. And we've got to play more consistently at those positions. And Braden's got to be more consistent as well. So, it's a combination of all those things that will help us be more productive offensively. And so, we'll look at that. I'll spend some time looking at that here this week, and we'll really, dive in and see how we can improve and be better. But that's something that's got to get better in 25 for sure.
Is the kind of offensive style the one you want to move forward with?
For me, offensive style has a lot to do with players. So, our style is going to reflect our players just like on defense. So, I think we will be better in a lot of positions next year. And, and we'll take a look at the style. We did what we felt like we needed to do this year to win. And, we'll evaluate that as we move through the offseason and address that.
All right, not the first time we've played that clip or talked about what's really being said there. I think you can listen to what he says, reading between the lines. There's a lot that is implied with Norvell there, and I think that's a good way to kind of segue here into the big questions we have. The biggest, I would say, is what is the offense going to look like? And that's a layered question because obviously you have a lot of question marks in terms of offensive play calling. I reported, it's been over a month now, that in that role as passing game coordinator, Matt Mumme will be the offensive play caller. That was not verified by CSU. We don't really know what's going to play out, but based on everything I've heard behind the scenes, I stand behind my report. So that's obviously a big factor with what is the offense going to look like, who's going to be calling the plays. But even beyond that, just from a broader sense, what is the offense going to look like? Last year, they leaned into a more run-heavy, West Coast concept-based offense, a lot of having BFN be under center, trying to set up the play action. I thought they should have set up the play action more than they did. But is it going to be a lot like what we saw last year, where it's closer to, a Shanahan-style offense, like classic Broncos in the late 90s? Or is it closer to the air raid? And we've never really seen a true air raid in Fort Collins. And even when he was in Nevada, they really incorporated a lot of the passing elements that they established, at Oklahoma and Texas, and like they incorporated some elements of the pistol offense, which Nevada was infamous for back in the day. I think there's some politics at play with that as well. Part of that was a PR move to win over the fan base. There's a lot of love for Chris Alt. I think, especially early on, if they just would have abandoned all of that, it might have been a little bit of culture shock for those Nevada fans. I don't know. There's a lot of factors that come into play with those types of decisions, but you've got your quarterback back for year 3, Braden Fowler-Nicolosi. He obviously has a ton of arm talent, and we've seen him at times do some pretty special things. And I've talked a lot about how I think when he's at his best, it's when CSU is going tempo, when he's able to get in a rhythm, really let it rip downfield. There are a couple of instances of that. Sometimes it was because CSU went down deep and maybe the defense was playing a little less aggressive and he was able to kind of take advantage. But I also really do feel like it just suits his strengths when he's able to get into a rhythm, complete some easy passes, and then let it rip downfield. We've seen him look really good in those instances. We've seen him make some really impressive throws. I don't think arm talent at this point is the question mark for BFN. The big question is, can he take things to the next level? I thought he showed a lot of positive over the season in terms of limiting the turnovers, and some of that had to do with what they were doing schematically. Didn't have the opportunity to turn the ball over because they just weren't throwing the ball downfield as much. Also has some things he needs to clean up. Still is at times too consistently inaccurate. I've pointed to footwork being an area where he could clean some things up. I think that would help him a lot. People that would argue with me would point to like people like Patrick Mahomes. I understand that. But I also think if you're comparing yourself to the best quarterback in the world, maybe going to set yourself up for disappointment. I just think that if he'd refine a couple of things in terms of his throwing mechanics and more specifically his footwork, I think he would have less of the accuracy issues that occasionally result in him missing some throws that he's certainly capable of making. And I think that's a pretty fair assessment of where BFN is at. He has looked incredible at times. He has also been fairly inconsistent. And like when you look at the passing struggles they had in the bowl game, and CSU just looked like shit in general in the bowl game in that second half. I'm not trying to pin it all on Braden. I think that would be incredibly unfair, especially given the spot he was in, losing, your top 2 receivers right before the bowl after having already lost Torrey Horton for the year. And there was a lot of wonkiness that factored into some of the inconsistencies they had as a passing offense. But when I hear Jay Norvell say things like, we did what we had to this year in order to be competitive, and we were young at receiver, and players are ultimately going to be a big factor in what we play call and what the scheme is going to be. To me, with a 3rd-year starting quarterback with a really talented receiving core on paper, I think top to bottom, this group is deeper than what CSU had last year. getting Lewis Brown back is massive. I mean, it would have been huge to have him last year, but getting him back is massive. But to me, all of that implies that we're going to see a much more aggressive offensive approach than maybe we saw last year. And I'm not saying that you just completely go away from what you established on the ground, especially given the backs that you have, Dupree and Justin Marshall. That's a pretty epic 1-2 punch. And you've got really good depth in the backfield as a whole. So, I don't think you just completely abandon that. But how much of a shift really is it? I mean, do they go full 2023? Is it kind of a hybrid between the last 2 years, or is it something we haven't even seen yet, which is possible as well? But what does the offense look like, I think, is probably the biggest question we have as of now. Another question I have, this applies to both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, but how do the Rams look in the trenches? Because you're losing pretty significant continuity on the offensive side of the ball. You lose a 3-year starter in Jacob Gardner at center. That's a big factor. You're losing both your starting tackles. I think you feel pretty good about guys like Tanner Morley and like Ader Urian Baranchea and some of these guys that you brought in. But you're going to have to hit on like Liam Wortman, the D2 transfer that came in, and probably need to replicate some of the success that you had going to lower levels and bringing guys up like you did with Drew Moss and Savion Henderson, who are both 2-year starters and both played really well at CSU and were able to hit the ground running. But it's hard to do that every year. And I know they went after a lot of guys. I do wish they would have been able to sign probably one more guy for the outside. I feel pretty good about the possibilities in the interior, especially with like Tanner Morley, who I think that dude is going to be a beast, especially by the time he's a junior, senior. You're probably going to have to get the checkbook out for him. But what do you look like on that offensive line? Because you can have a veteran quarterback, you can have 3-4 stud running backs and a receiving core that on paper is better than anybody in the league. But if you can't block in the trenches, that's going to be kind of a moot point. So how does the offensive line look? And then defensively, you have a lot of new pieces. Like, you were planning on guys like Gatkuth and Kershke taking things to the next level this year. And obviously losing them was a pretty big blow. I like, guys like Jaquez Evans, who they bring over the Baylor transfer, who was a stud at Western Kentucky under Tyson Summers. I like some of what they did on that side of the ball. I think they're going to be really athletic when you look at like the linebackers and the corners and some of the edge rushers that they've brought over. But it's just so many moving pieces. And the trenches in particular, I think, is going to be a pretty big indication of where this team is at. And I just think back to that 2022 spring, the first one under Norvell, and the D-line and all 3 scrimmages really own the offensive line. And you can look at that as, okay, like the defense is going to be really good, but a lot of the time that's an indication that your offense is going to be bad. I feel like in spring, especially, a little bit less so in camp, but in spring especially, your offense should basically be dominating. They should have a leg up. So how do you look in the trenches? It's going to be one of the biggest questions for me. And then defensively on top of that, what kind of scheme are you going to run? We're going to play another clip here from Jay Norvell from December 23rd, talking about Tyson Summers, talking about the need to be more multiple. Freddie was pretty consistent in that 4-2-5 base defense. They didn't shake things up very frequently. I think being able to have more versatility defensively, throwing 3-man fronts at people, 4-man fronts, maybe a 5 every now and then. I think that's a big part of what Jay would like to see more of this year. So again, here's Jay Norvell. This was from December 23rd, right before the bowl game, kind of talking about some of those things.
Summers, how did you guys connect, and what in your conversations made you, kind of think he's the guy to elevate?
No, I had my own process of, I've had so many people reach out to me that were interested in this job coming here. I mean, former head coaches, people in the NFL, but I was very specific of what I was looking for. I really believe that we need to play some more combination coverages. more bracket coverages. He's got an extensive history of doing that. You know, and people are playing more fronts, you know, and you know, our style of defense that we played has a long history. Okay, Monty Kiffin played it, Nebraska. Coach Lubick played it when he was here. They used to have 4-3 clinics here, and you know, when I was with the Raiders, we played Tampa and Monty Kiffin, and they were Tampa 2 team. But people are evolving, and there are people that have played that defense that are changing, and so Kansas State's done it. You know, they were a classic 4-3 team, and they are almost exclusively 3-3-5 now. And so did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people over the country, seen the changes that people have made, and you got to be willing to change. You can't be hard-headed and stubborn in this day of age. Football is constantly evolving, and we have to evolve with it. You know, and we can't play like it's 1985. It ain't, you know, and so we you know, I talked to a lot of people, and Tyson's name kept coming up. You know, he used to coach here. I talked to a lot of people here about Tyson that were here when he was here. Coach guys that have played for him, and so I just was convinced that he checked all the boxes of what we were looking for. Had long conversations with a lot of people about this job, and I'm very, very, very at peace with our process and how we went about it, and super excited to have him here.
How big is it to add a coach that has familiarity with this region, with
Yeah,
multiple schools?
it's huge. You know, he coached both at CSU and CU. He's been around some amazing people, and he's familiar with this community, and he's familiar with this region, and so really, really excited to have him. I mean, he's a South Georgia guy. You know, as soon as he opens his mouth, you know where he's from. But he just loves his time with the Rams. He left here to become a head coach, and so he's got that experience as well. And so, you know, there's a leadership component to this position I was looking for too. I wanted a guy that you know could really handle half the team and be aligned with the things that, you know, I was looking for as a head coach. And so that was an important piece of it too. But, you know, he brings a lot to the table coming back.
All right. Jay has said a lot without saying a lot. This offseason, at times, he actually has said a lot in terms of how he felt about how the defense was being run in previous years. Very clear that he wants to have, I think, a bigger input defensively, and I come back to the offensive play calling stuff. I think that's another reason why it would make a lot of sense to hand those play calling duties off to Mummy, is to just free up Norvell to be more of a CEO type, especially on game day. It's just a lot to manage there, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what this defense looks like. Very realistic chance to have 9-10 new starters. I mean, it'll be like 10 if you're doing it based on who is on the team in the regular season. I think 9 based on the bowl game, because guys like Owen Long, you know, assumingly will step up and fill that starting role that they got at the end of the season after some guys left in the portal. A couple more questions I have about CSU going into the spring, and these are more broad, big picture. If you want to throw anything in the Toyota chat, I'll get to as many as I can here before we get out of here. I'm interested to see who the leaders are on both sides of the ball, because when you look at the amount of veterans that this team lost in every phase, I mean, offensively, you lose Jacob Gardner, who's a 5-year starter in the Mountain West. You lose Torrey Horton, maybe the best wide receiver in Mountain West history, at least in the conversation with guys like Rashard Higgins and Devontae Adams. I think David Anderson deserves more love in that conversation as well, but that's a rant for another day. Defensively, you lose Chase Wilson and Jack Howell and Henry Blackburn. I mean, those have been, along with like Mo Camara there for a year or two, those were the faces of your defense, the biggest leaders you had in your program. Even somebody like Patty Turner was a huge vocal leader for this team. And I do wonder who steps up and fills that void. Lewis Brown has been in the program for a couple years, but he left and came back. Can he be a vocal leader for the team? We'll see. BFN became a captain after Torrey went down. I think him kind of taking that next step as a vocal leader for the team is really going to be big. And whether the Rams in the locker room like truly buy into that or not, I think will be at least a factor in the type of success CSU is ultimately able to have this year. But he's going to have to take a next step there because you're losing a lot of veteran pieces that have kind of helped you set the standard. And for a third-year starting quarterback, like, you're going to have pretty high hopes for him in that regard, in terms of just being somebody that sets the standard and is a role model for the rest of the team and somebody that the rest of the team buys into. I think that BFN has a swagger to him. I think he lit a spark when he took over for Clay, and that needed to happen in September. But this is a big year for him on the field, off the field. Like, this is kind of where you either cement your legacy or you have people scratching their heads, wondering what the next move is going to be. So that's going to be a big factor. And then, defensively, like, just who is the leader? Is a sophomore like Owen Long able to step up, or somebody like Dylan Phelps who, flashed as the season went on? Maybe it's one of the new guys, maybe it's a Jacob Ellis who comes over from Iowa State, or a Jaquez Evans who's had great success, was a preseason defensive player of the year at Western Kentucky before he got hurt. Who are your leaders, though? Because there's some pretty big shoes to fill when it comes to that. And then lastly, this is pretty obvious, but just how quickly can you mesh, and does it look like there is a clear upgrade in athleticism? Because on the surface, when I dive into the transfers that CSU has added, when I look at what was gained versus what was added, especially offensively, I think CSU has upgraded. I think they're clearly going to be more athletic on the defensive side of the ball. I think they're going to have more team speed. I think they're going to have more explosiveness. But it's a lot of moving pieces, and it's a lot of new parts that you are going to need to be able to hit the ground running, that you're going to need to be able to mesh fairly quickly there. And that process is ultimately going to dictate how much success you're able to have. Because in a 12-game season, if you start slow, go 1-3 in September or something like that, only 2-2, just greatly limits your potential to mount a championship caliber season, to put yourself in the picture for the college football playoff, which sounds dramatic, I know, and I'm not trying to be a clickbait guy or anything like that, but that really has to be the hope and the expectation coming into this year, is to push for the college football playoff. You should expect the Mountain West winner to be one of the highest rated conference champions. I don't know if they're going to get a bye like Boise did, but whoever wins the league is likely going to be playing in the playoff. And if you're CSU with a third-year starting quarterback, with the talent you have at the skill positions, with the speed that you brought over defensively, you should expect to be pushing, towards the top of the league, especially given some of the question marks that are at UNLV. And, Boise brings back Madsen, but Genty was their whole team, I think on paper, there's a lot to like about CSU's possibilities here and their potential to make some serious noise, but you've got to live up to it. And in year 4, the expectation within this fan base, I think, is kind of it's now or never. And especially with the move to the Pac-12 looming, I just think the expectation is going to be to build off of what you established this season and really take it to the next level. I said it before, I'll say it again. 2024 needs to be the standard. That's got to be the floor and not the ceiling. And because of that, you're going to have a pretty good year, I think, if you really want people to buy into this program under Jay Norvell. So a lot to find out over these next 6 months. It's going to be a huge year. 2025 in general is a massive year for CSU. Last year in the Mountain West, before you go to the Pac-12, you want to continue the momentum you have on the hardwood and, maybe even really kick things off with a bang here. Like if you get to the NCAA tournament, just the momentum that creates for you as an athletic department going into the summer with then a very exciting football season and all the possibility that comes with that. Like there's a chance for this to be one of the more fun calendar years that we've had at CSU in a while. And I'm actually going to talk about this. Maybe I'll talk about it tomorrow. Had it posed to me on Twitter by Colton. I'm drawing a blank on your last name, buddy. I'm sorry. But he wanted to know what the most fun calendar year to be a CSU student would be. And what jumped in my head was 2002-03, because 2002, one of the best football regular seasons of all time. They win the Mountain West tournament on the men's side in 03. That's pretty tough to top in a calendar year. But I think, there's some Roddy Stevens stuff that you could look at, some 13, 14 stuff, some 96, 97, 98. I mean, it's kind of a fun topic that I think we'll dive into at some point. But 2025 is going to be a huge year, and it's going to be interesting to see like what CSU is able to do with it. Jacob, before we get out of here in the Toyota chat, so sorry, basketball question. Given the move to the Pac, would it make more sense to throw a little bit more money at Medved this offseason to keep him in the fort? I don't think realistically there's a whole lot more you can do for him financially at the moment. He's already going to be north of $2 million a year. I mean, he's getting football money to coach basketball at a mid-major, which is not going to be the case very often. They make another tournament run. You get the media rights evaluation from the Pac-12, and if you get a bunch of money in, I do think at that point you do look at giving him a raise. I think keeping him happier at this point will be more about the institutional support and things like renovations to Moby, NIL resources, that type of stuff that help you sustain your program, that are arguably bigger factors than money at this point. But the reality is, as a Big Ten school, is always going to be able to swoop in and offer him double at least what CSU can. I said it yesterday, but I don't think the list of schools that Medved would actually leave for at this point is very long. I think he's learned from some of the stuff that happened with Miles and most recently Craig Smith. I think he understands that he's got a pretty good thing going here. Yes, there are certain gigs he can't turn down, whether it just be it's too good of an opportunity, it's too big of a paycheck to pass up on. I don't feel terrible like going into this offseason. I think the fact that they were able to keep him last year is a really good indication of where we're at. Before we get out of here, Jacob also wants to know, do you anticipate any Moby changes this offseason? I don't know if it'll be this offseason specifically. I think pretty confidently, I would say by the time maybe it's like a year or two in, but I think right around the time the Pac-12 play starts, there will have been some upgrades to Moby. I know that it's been in the back of the mind of the admin for a while. It was one of the things that they took note of when we went to Dayton last year. That arena was sick, and it made me think of if they could do just a couple of small tweaks in terms of modernization, what an incredible facility Moby could be. All right, I'll have coverage tonight throughout the CSU boys game. Shout out to everybody that's been rocking with us. I'll have post-game coverage as well. Much love to everybody in Ram Nation. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.